So yeah, Darwin, I wanted to talk to you
Mhm.
about your second place run here, or sorry, third place run at
Netflix, yeah.
at the UK Open, and with branded Despia, and I've seen that you also have a history with the deck too, which is awesome, and also we have Khalid here, who was also on the deck profile, and if you guys want to kind of introduce yourselves.
Yeah. So my name is Darwin. I'm the top three in the UK Open. And is it my friend Khalid here? He helps me with my list a lot, especially by basically just explaining me what the best non-engine is to play and how to play around the format. And then whatever it gives me, I'll just pilot it.
Awesome. And then yeah,
Oh yeah,
so yeah, Khalid.
oh yeah, and my name is Khalid. I hope Darwin, and I also play Memento Fiendsmith. Um, yeah, the main talk today is about Darwin's crazy run on branded.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we can get right into that. And Darwin, I have to ask. So
Mhm.
what brought you to what was your perspective before this event with bringing in branded? Have you been testing branded a lot this format? Have you been playing around with other decks? Because I've seen that you've had tops with branded before. I saw that you topped the UK Nationals with branded. So I know you've been on the deck for a while, and but I was just kind of curious what your mindset for this format was with bringing branded.
Yeah, so I've been playing Branded ever since it came out, so it's the deck that I feel most comfortable with. And I just thought with the Breaker variant and playing no hand traps, it's quite good into breaking boards. The only bad matchup I would say was Malice, because they basically play 6 Ashes plus Shifter and Bestials. But then just game 2 and 3 just get even more decisive.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
So, oh, sorry.
Yeah, and just like getting into Lancia, for example, and trying to like another cool play is if you don't join to Lancia, but you go first, instead of doing the idle lock, you can just summon Chaos Hunter to your side of the field.
Okay, so is that kind of a line that you were using a lot with with Malice? Because I saw with your run you did play against 2 Malice, so I'm very
Mhm.
curious to see how those went. I know you said in the one game in the deck profile, which I'll have linked down below, and also I'll have the Darwin, your team, your channel, the collective link down below. Also, please check it out and subscribe to them and check out the deck profile to see it from to see just from his perspective, but also so you played against 2 Malice. Is that kind of one of those lines that you did? And how did those
Yeah.
Malice matchups go in general?
So against the first Malice player, I won die roll. And the line that I use is the if I draw into Frost, then I won't send Ido in my turn, but in his turn when he's already lost locked. Or when I already have a retribution set for the bestial when I try to summon the Ido from Sanctifier.
Okay, so and then would you did you here? I guess you could tell me how did those like so that's kind of what you end up preparing for the Malice matchup, and then also I see that in the side deck, obviously you mentioned the Chaos Hunters and the Lancias. It seems like you're definitely like prepared for the Malice games, and so the Malice matchups in general, do you find to be more die roll dependent, or do you like even if you end up losing die roll, you still feel like you have ways to kind of win those game ones? Because I feel like generally like Malice definitely is one of like you mentioned is the
Mhm.
issue for branded this format. Like I generally think like we have a pretty good pure Ryzeal matchup, but
Mhm.
Malice
I think so,
is yeah, but Malice is definitely the issue.
Yeah. So, w- um, with Malice, it's not really about like because I think the branded engine can break the Malice engine by itself, but them having different non-engine, like how many non-engine they have, is basically like how easy it is to win, or if it's actually winnable. Because if they draw, for example, Ash Impulse 2 Bestials and a starter, then that is a game that we normally lose, like in game ones.
Yeah.
But if you know how to play around the Bestials and like kind of bait them out, then for example, the board breakers we play like Talons or Frost or Super Poly especially actually really helps in that matchup, because when they go first and end on a Bow and Griffin, then and we have for example Super Poly and like a Quem or another Despia monster like Aluba, then we can summon it, activate the effect, and if you have an Imperm or Vela, dodge it with the Super Poly as well, and take out two monsters for Proskinion. So that was my best bet against Malice, because I saw most Malice players ending on the Abao and the Griffin lock. And then what we can do with the Proskinion is summon back either the Abao or the Griffin to outside of the field. And then either they have to Bestial it, or the resolve if they don't have a Bestial.
Wow, yeah, and I saw you mentioned this in the profile too. You don't really have any or no, you are running the Garura, and you felt like the Proskinion, the Garura, you were more or less kind of using your own engine with the Super Poly to kind of clean up those boards, and that seemed like enough. It's not like you missed the Mud Dragon or anything like that, right?
No, to be honest, I haven't missed much during a single time the tournament.
Yeah.
And like, for me, was the issue, like for example, like in both feature matches I had, I started with Aluba, and then I got Vela, and I passed. So sometimes Brandon just has those hands where you lose to one of these hand traps. But like going second, if he already has a monster on field and I have a Super Poly or Droplet, then not only can I dodge the Imperm of Vela, but also like take out a few other of his cards while
Yeah.
resolving my effect as well.
Okay.
Which was the main point of me playing Ghost Breakers.
So I have to ask, because one of the things that you did mention and then I've been a fan of personally is something like Molcharmi Fuwalos in the main deck, specifically just for like Malice and then like Mermal and stuff like that, just to help like at least not lose those game ones. And I think you mentioned if you were to run Molcharmi Fuwalos, maybe alluding to the fact you had tested it or not, that you would run 3 branded in high spirits, and maybe you can tell me what your guys' perspective on choosing not to main or side deck Fuwalos over more board breakers.
If I'm being real honest, I actually just didn't have Fuwalos and I had no access to them. Otherwise, I would have played them.
What would you have cut maybe in that case?
Let me get out the list. So we would have to add 4 cards because it'll be the 3 Fuwalos plus the 3rd high spirits. I have the list in front of me now. Probably cut down on 1 Mercurial.
I think we discussed it, and I think we would actually just add it more to the engine, because
that's an option as well.
Yeah, because Fuwalos would provide us like a better going second card, and not just that as a going first card, because you're playing like more consistency cards with the high spirits. Like you're gonna have a consistent card to pitch. Fuwalos isn't a bad card. It's a winged beast that can dump Ring Brim and then get you to your plays. So we would probably just add it to the deck rather than like cut it, because cards like Super Poly, Frost, Talent, Droplet, they're too mandatory and branded, and we all know that in branded, like you don't really ever play close to 40. Like those just don't really ever work out, because you will open the brickier hands or not enough of like the stronger cards you want to see, rather than opening cards like Adlib, Mercurial. You want to get them throughout the engine. And in my opinion, that the engine that it's at now is pretty much the best in terms of consistency. So I don't think cutting like engine would help. I think it would rather like decrease the capabilities of how Darwin plays branded, which is like going for the highest value, beating hand traps, and consistently just and I'm not gonna lie, if Darwin had Fuwalos, I think it would have been a 9-0 run.
Oh wow, okay. Yeah, okay. So that's why I was kind of curious because how you guys talked about it, I figured it might have just been kind of a situation where you didn't have them, but I still like I really do like this build because a lot of people I've been just shoving Fuwalos in all my lists and people are like, "Oh, I don't want to spend the $300 on Fuwalos," and I feel like this kind of shows the way to go about that where you guys chose kind of the best board breakers in the room for the format. I do love just the blowouts that like Super Poly and in the triple talents is something like I haven't seen in Branded in a while, and I know you guys kind of talked about it in the profile as well, but I'm kind of curious how overall the triple tactics talents at 3, how has that been performing in and out of testing and on your run, and is this something that it sounds like you would continue to run? And some people are like, oh, talents isn't great in Branded because you can't just like take off and link something, but was that really ever just like, let me know what how it was in your guys' experience.
So talents is the best card in that deck by far. By far, because the thing is, if you open, like for example, Aluba against Veilet or something, then you can talents look in the hand and just rip out another hand trap, for example, an Ash or an Impulse, and then we have so many ways to get to Branded Fusion. So like, if I open talents, all I'm trying to do is trying to bait out hand traps, so I can take a look at his hand, see what hand traps he has, take the one that has the most impact against me out, and I have knowledge of his entire hand as well, which helps me during his turn to either idle lock him or just break his board during his turn. So talents by far was the best card.
And if I might chime in here, the thing with Branded is that you can normally always play through like 2 hand traps, and especially the way that like we built the deck, it's like it's always going to be consistent enough to do that. Sometimes obviously there is variance hands, for example, the two feature matches, but like in his hand, for example, he had talents and thrust, but it had to be exactly imperm. So sometimes there will be variants like that, but more often than not, in this format, people are always going to be playing like cards like Fuwalos and Ash, and people sometimes they don't shotgun the Fuwa. And then in main phase, because he's playing through so many hand traps, like or even just like baiting one, and then the moment you try to look at hand, especially in a deck like Branded, no matter what, you're still going to be able to end on like what you want. It's just based off what they have. So for example, if you know you can beat the Veiler because of a dodge card that you have, maybe like it's Branded in red, you know that you can just leave the Veiler in their hand, rip the Bestial, you keep playing, and then you will eventually get to a point where you know what their hand is, which means you know that the only unexpected card is their top deck, and more often than not, you'll always be able to beat it because they're not always going to draw the exact out, but you're always going to have like more. Like for example, like with Darwin, like he'll even tell you like standardly he's capable of playing through like 2 hand traps minimum, and that's when talents comes in for value because you're setting up full combo while knowing their whole hand, ripping the problem card out, and guaranteeing the Edo's lock is gonna stick. For example, if you saw Droplet, you could rip it and do it. It's the same premise with like a lot of different combo decks that have several pushes, and Branded is one of them.
Very well said, very well said. And I think that's something that people should be considering in their Branded builds because that's just not something I've seen. And it's one of those cards that, yes, it can be dead, but it's genuinely one of the only cards in the game I think that's like generic in the sense that can almost just end the game on the spot if you rip the right card. And also just the fact that, like you said, with Branded, on average you can play through a couple hand traps, so the fact that you're always going for talents rip going first I think is huge value with that card for the most part. And even going second, if they have a 6-card hand to rip Ash, you got to do what you got to do, or just taking out a monster like you said to kind of break up the board that is Malice and stuff like that. So very well said. And that kind of leads me into my next point about your deck build, because there's a few different kind of like grind game choices that I like that you guys employed with the build that maybe you could elaborate, that Darwin and colleague could elaborate on. But we see the ad lib and the Ido being ran, and I know Darwin, when I was watching the deck profile, I saw you said you idol locked 12 times on the run, which
Yeah.
did, yeah, no, that's so maybe that can kind of lead into do you guys think that running Ido is correct in branded, or was this more of a format choice, and how was it overall for you in the main deck? And then maybe talk about like how that was with adlib, because that isn't traditionally like, I haven't seen a lot of people run Ido and like the lock and adlib in a while, but it seemed like it was like great for you, so let me know.
So the reason why I actually chose Ido as a lock as well is that I can picture in case I have in hand, I can picture with High Spirits, and then Quarter to the Grave and add any Fond of Alba's name. That is one thing in case the hand is not good. And Ido just by itself, the lock is just so good because if they can't out it, then it's literally a turn skip. And like we went full combo on our turn, Ido locked them. They have no out, they pass, and we just go for the OTK next turn. Adlib I actually really like, because like as you can see in the list, I only play one Mirror Jade because we thought one is actually enough. And in case they outer, then Adlib can just get it back.
Yeah, no, that's actually kind of something that I really like about the list too, because it gives you more room for your extra deck to be more utility. Like, you're able to run things like Double Gwignall and the Magnum the Reliever and Stapelia, which I just think, like, you know, a lot of cards, you know, the Stapelia, for instance, I think just makes like your Super Poly a lot better into rogue matchups and helps like simplified board states. So I do like that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so I think
Yeah.
that's gotten a lot of people to reconsider adlib, frankly. And oh, sorry.
Go on, sorry.
No, I wasn't go. If you were gonna make a point, please do.
The only thing I was going to say, because you mentioned Magnum, I actually took Magnum out because through the entire run I actually didn't go into it once, but I changed it for Alba Venatas.
Okay, that was something I was gonna ask. Actually, did you guys test with Alba Lenatus? Was that not really a big enough factor going into an event like with, you know, presumably a ton of Ryzeal and Malice kind of situation?
Yeah, so Alba Venatas was only really good against Blue Eyes, and the matchup was kind of free already. So we just didn't think that we needed it. But another good point was that I can picture of Mirror Jade and in the end phase. Like for example, I have Mirror Jade in my opponent's turn as an Albalanatus, and I already have access to fusion, but I don't have access to a Cartesian. Then I can just have fusion deployment.
Oh yeah, that's really good for the grind game too, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not just that. You can, if you use all your materials, like
Oh yeah.
like for
the
example,
recycling.
Albion, like Albion, and like all the other dragons, you can summon Lebellion, shuffle back all dragons in your graveyard and banished, and then summon Alba Lenatus because it says 1+ dragon monster, so it can consider for all of them. And with Lebellion, you're literally cheating out a recycling system for the deck.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's actually like the secret goo with branded. I haven't heard someone mention that combo in a minute. It's definitely how you can grind. And you mentioned that in the deck profile that you set up this deck to really be able to grind. I think, you know, between looking at the double branded in red on top of a branded in white with, once again, just like also having the ad lib for always keeping that Mirror Jade in rotation and having like another good send off the second Gwignall, and, you know, I think it all kind of feeds into itself. But did you overall feel like, you know, the double branded in red and the branded in white in like a 50 card build, what felt good for you? Like, and how was that?
So, and Branded in Red, I always run it too because during the grind game, the second copy just comes up. And Branded in White is in the grind game better than Branded Fusion because you already have your entire graveyard set up, and then Branded White you can literally nearly go into anything.
Yeah, it becomes kind of like a turn 3 like branded fusion, like you said, almost like better, especially when you have like Mercurier in the graveyard when you're running like double Mercurier and stuff like that. It just ends up being like one of the best crackbacks you can have in a format that is like consistently, like, I don't know about your guys' games, I feel like these games are getting to be quite grindy outside of just like the blowouts with Fuwalos and stuff like that, or in Droll, but I feel like these games can get quite grindy. So building your deck to be able to do that when branded already has a great grind game, but I think like, you know, always having the white in the pocket is really nice, and having like the second red. So, you know, I think I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but like, you know, you're running the double Albion. So like if you get Albaz in the graveyard and you draw Branded in red, like that's your line for dodging Imperm. So that's why I've always loved double Branded in red for utility.
Well, one point I may add is that for the double Mercurial, most people I've seen like they put double Tragedy. I never really liked it because I believe that Springen's Kit is just a better like card to like get cards from like graveyard banished or even deck. But the thing is,
Especially with one Branded Fusion.
yeah, and then with two Mercurial, I think it's nicer because you normally always like, for example, he plays Allure, and I'm telling you, like, you'll have 5 spells in hand and activate Allure and manifest the Mercurial to his hand somehow. And then, but the thing is, when you use it with an engine initially, you do want one to search off Lost because sometimes you'll have enough follow up because in Branded, once you've resolved like combo, it's got a new follow up. For example, you've activated Mirror Jade, you have something in the as a graveyard effect for the end phase. If you had a high spirits that you used last turn, you're gonna get it for the next turn. Like you have so much, you have so much recursion in the deck. But the thing is, with Mercurial, like you do kind of want that extra push. And Mercurial is like I've never really consider that to be a bad card in your opening hand because you can do plays with like, for example, Brandon and White. If you open too much engine, summon a card that just summon, I don't know, Ring Brom using an Albaz in hand, and then later if you get into engine, you can just activate Branded Fusion. They try to Ash it, you have a Mercuria in hand. But there's so much facility to searching it as well, so I think it always works out well.
And people never play around the hard open Mercurier from what I've seen. So I've seen just like a lot of people just like end up imperming Albion, I go Mercurier, and I just banish the same Mercurier, and like the amount of advantage you just gain from that interaction alone just goes crazy. So yeah, no, that I do love that. And I think now I'm gonna kinda go into a few things that I noticed that you guys did not end up running. I think like, you know, the side I feel like the branded side deck before we get into that is pretty, I don't know, solved at this point for this format. Like I always see people run like 6 options for Malice, and then Lightning Storm Harpies, and then the Xyz Encores, which we saw. And please check out the feature matches, guys. Like incredible technical play by Darwin on display. And I do think like having, or we saw the Xyz Encores. I feel like it's just one of those things you have to end up running in this format with Dweller until hopefully maybe it's banned, but until then it's, and then also Detonator, right? Like so I feel like that's quite standard, unless you guys have any thoughts on like what you guys did for the side deck. I mean, I do see the Starving Venom in Masquerade, which sounds about right for Malice.
Yeah, so for Lancia and Chaos Hunter are just like obviously cards that are good against Malice. And as Darwin said in the beginning, like Malice is the worst matchup. Lightning Storm Harpy just has a lot of coverage because like people in YuGiOh they're playing cards like Strike, and a big interruption in Malice, right? It is White Binder, or when you know when they just have it in the graveyard, they're gonna reborn it of GWC. A good thing to have is like Lightning Storm and Harpies just to bait all of it out early, because then that means they're going to commit the White Binder to banishing their own cards rather than your cards, which makes your life a lot easier in terms of like getting the graveyard set up, having the branded, like them not just chaining GWC to Branded Fusion, and you just lose your Branded Fusion along with the 2 monsters that you've sent. And then with Exit Encore, it's mandatory for YuGiOh. It's like you need to hit Detonator, you can hit
Dweller,
obviously that's like the biggest option. Sanctum was because we play Free Thrust, and Malice is the worst matchup, so we had to commit that 1 card for them. But in terms of YuGiOh, you can break the board without the use of the Encore. But with Malice, like we kind of did want to open like we always wanted to open a card that we felt like comfortable, like ending on and knowing that it's like a 3-for-1 value hand trap. For example, Lancia, Chaos Hunter, Sanctum, or if we just have like resourceful combo, obviously like Idolock is pretty strong. And Starving Venom is just for Malice, for going first or second. Like when they like Dormouse, they banish, summon, you can just super poly both. But then they have to like have a Bestial to banish the other one, but then you have an interruption that should be able to take care of that. And they've used both banish effects.
Yeah, Starving Venom is actually also really nice going second to Malice to go for the OTK. That you can super poly 2 targets, and Starving Venom get for example the attack of White Binder or the highest monster, and then try to get into Corritus and make the monster 0 and just go for the OTK. So sometimes, again, if I go second, I don't try to end on the end board. I just try to OTK.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I think, like you said, Quertus and Starving Venom especially, I think would help that out a lot. And I actually really do like how, Khaled, you mentioned the Lightning Storm and the Harpy Feather Duster are good into Malice, because I see a lot of people kind of neglect that when it's in their side decks, because I think like there's a lot of value in forcing out the in the Malice plays. I think it's like Malice really, I think, can like playing into the Malice board really hurts when like they start resolving like their non-targeting banishes and stuff like that from like their traps, and that kind of baits that situation, so it's a lot easier to play through. And also like obviously all their monsters are in attack position, so like Lightning Storm just has a lot more value in that kind of situation. But yeah, so I have a couple questions about cards you guys did and did not run. But I think someone also did ask the one Mirror Jade, do you think that's kind of like the way forward? You thought it was just fine with just the ad lib and the one Mirror Jade. You never
Yeah.
missed actually having the physical second Mirror Jade.
Not really, especially since I started actually setting retribution in the end phase of Albion, because then I can literally just shuffle back all the engine that I need. I think I shuffled back Mirror Jade like 2-3 times of retribution during the grind game, and just went into it straight after it by normal coming full of Valpas. So to be fair, I actually never missed a second Mirror Jade.
It's not that great of an interruption.
Yeah, so and then so the allure of darkness into this format. I also don't see Nadir. Did you guys test Nadir at all? Did you overall end up liking the allure? Let me know about those cards if you ever ended up testing the Nadir Servant or not.
Yeah, so people are playing Fiendsmith, and you don't really want to give people value off Nadir Servant, because the card's supposed to be giving you pluses. But for example, if you're playing against Mitsurugi, if you're playing against any sort of Fiendsmith variant, you're just giving them an additional plus by them getting the cards in the grave. For example, sending Desiree, sending Requiem, Desiree, shuffle back. And it works differently than it does in, like, for example, a deck like Mitsurugi. When they go into Maximus, it's normally to get them into engine. But normally with Branded, Nadir Servant is like the turn ender. It's what you're going to be doing before passing, because you're not going to be fusioning anymore. So the whole premise is that you've already set up your board, and if if they're playing Fiendsmith and then they just send a Desiree, they can actually interact with a real card on your field. Whether like it comes to like Mitsurugi, where by the time they've activated this Maximus, they're not going to ritual summon until like 2-3 actions later, so you're not necessarily going to get any sort of value from it. So yeah, I just don't think that is like correct this format, and I think like the consistency that like we get from this, it feels so much stronger, especially with like free Allure.
Allure's been insane.
Yeah, because Allure's always been crazy in Branded.
Yeah, have you guys like seen Droll kind of being an issue for running Allure, or do you think still when you're running a 50 card build, it's not really that crazy in terms of searches, so it ends up like being fine? Like you never got turn skip to Droll on in your run, Darwin, or I don't know how that's been in for testing for you.
Yeah. Not really, because I'm being careful of Droll. If I have, for example, a law and like another engine piece, depending on my hand, I'll just start with the most important one. If I, for example, already have Branded Fusion and deployment and have an Allure with Mercuria, then I'll just go for the Allure. But if I, for example, have 4 monsters including Aluba and one Allure, then I'll go for the Aluba search first. And if I got Drolled afterwards, then I'll just Allure in the next turn. Or worst case, use it as a discard.
And because like Branded doesn't necessarily die to draw, it's not the worst big. Once you have like the major component you needed, the draw doesn't matter. Like if you resolved High Spirits and they draw you, you don't really care, because everything's already resolved, and at this point you've searched Quem. Quem's just gonna dump another card. You have the graveyard set up. Quem can reborn that monster when the extract monster that's gonna resolve for example, Brandon in red, so you can fusion on the opponent's turn and then trigger Quem to reborn and then just make a Mirror Jade or whatever play you decide to go for.
Awesome. And then I do have to ask because someone I bet will end up asking this, but actually I should ask this first, but did you ever test the second Quem, or did you miss the second Quem? Especially with Tug Wignall,
No.
or did you not really find that to be something you needed to make as a deck building concession?
Um, uh, I think Quem is a good card, but we already have so many noble summons, and in the line that I normally do it, that I already have Quem. In the end phase, I will add back the Cartesia. I go, for example, Fusion Duplication into Rebellion, discard the Cartesia for the Rebellion effect, and then chain Quem straight away. So the Quem already, summoning the Cartesia already brought me the value that I needed, so I can shuffle that back, plus an Albas for the Sanctifier, and later on, if he manages to bestial something, I can just Grenadier summon the Quem back and get an extra dump. So the second Quem I actually never missed because I just kept recycling it.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely just one of those things where you can make these kinds of concessions as long as you're like careful about the grind game. That totally makes a lot of sense to me. And maybe an out there kind of question, but did you ever test Gizmek Uka in your main deck for things like Fiendsmith and like Ryzeal in order to kind of make like a turn 0 Mirror Jade on your opponent's turn? I'm not sure if that, because that's a card I've
Um,
seen some of my friends test, and I'm curious if that ever
yeah.
really.
So I would I haven't tested Gizmo Uka yet. I would play it though once I get my Fuwalos.
Oh, okay,
But
so yeah, you can draw into them.
but, but without Fuwalos, I won't. I won't play the Gizmo Uka. A funny thing with Gizmo Uka you can actually do. It's actually a funny 3-card combo with Gizmo Uka, Albas, and Ido, where you can Ido lock them in their turn.
Yeah, that honestly, that is definitely one of my favorite combos you can do in branded. So, yeah, no, that's definitely something. So that's cool. It's at least on your radar.
Yeah.
And I have maybe more of a general question from one of our Discorders, and this is probably a good question for someone who's been playing branded too for a while. Do you think branded could be a long-term deck, as in should we keep running it or wait for the next big meta deck to come out to replace Ryzeal?
I mean, I've played this deck ever since it came out for every single format, and I every single time or every single year I did actually perform. Like I went to 3 nationals and I topped all of them, all of branded, and I only started playing 4 years ago. So I think if you really commit to a deck, and know it inside and out, then in any format, all you have to do is get the right non-engine, and just try your best. Of course, some formats will be harder than others. It's just about how much work you put in and see if you can actually like make a list that will work.
I have to maybe ask, maybe because this is an extension, how do you end up testing? Like, are you guys like dueling book heads? Do you use like IRL testing as something like, um, just as something, you know, as a branded player, maybe other people can look at for testing, because I know a lot of people are always looking for ways to learn the deck more, and curious what your testing regiment is.
For me, I do test on DB, but only for like when there's like big events. I'm not that big of a fan of DB, to be honest. I'd rather play in person, because when like there are also some things in YuGiOh that are not YuGiOh related. Like for example, like knowing how to deal with like difficult people, for example, and like those types of things you only learn like in real life play. And I'm just not a fan of TV because it's too slow. I'd rather play real life. Let's just go to locals, go to different tournaments, a lot of regionals. That's how you get the best experience.
No, well said, well said, well said. And then yeah, I think that should wrap it up for most of the questions. I think maybe as like a fun question, have you guys looked into the Dragon Tail deck at all? possibly as something that you could run with Branded in the future. If not, I'd recommend checking it out. That deck looks really good in the OCG right now. But
I think I think they have a Dark Dragon that we can send off
Yeah.
Brian Fusion.
Yeah, there is.
Yep.
Also, I think there's actually branded support coming out in the, not the Battle of Legend, in the Duelist Delight. There's like a new set, it's Duelist something. The new branded support should be coming out.
It's the same set with the new Monarchs.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, I think it's
So-
basically like the first set that like they're adding cards from the Animation Chronicle in, and we know that there's going to be an Nabaz anime slash Sky Striker anime. I know the Sky Striker anime is coming out first. So like it to me that seems like it's either going to be the Duelist, I believe it's Overdrive, maybe. It's one of those.
Yeah.
It's going to be either that set or the set after, but yeah, to me that's always just like Reda's new branded support. And we already saw a new Sky Striker Link 1 has been announced without the effect, so that thing's kind of already happening. So between Dragon Tail, which I already see a lot of OCG players trying to cook with branded, and honestly Dragon Tail is looking to be tier 1 like no doubt. So it's I think the future is bright for if you want to run branded, and I think that kind of couples well with the last question. So yeah, definitely lots to look forward to in that department. And
Yeah, that's something that we'll definitely look into.
Hell yeah. And then do you guys have any like shout outs, any places that people can check you guys out once again, so viewers can check out what you guys do?
Yeah, of course. So, shout out to my team, the collective. Chris, as nice you also put, I think, the link to our channel onto the video.
Of course.
Yeah, and also shout out to Europa Gaming. Is the locals that we normally go to. It's the best locals in the UK. And also shout out to Khalid. You also have a YouTube channel.
Oh yeah, my YouTube channel is OT Khalid. So it's like OTK.
We'll link that as well. OT Khalid. Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I just posted my top 8 regional at Darksphere. So if you want to check that out as well. Memento Fiendsmith is actually quite similar to branded as well. So
Oh, don't tell me that. I'm gonna have to learn that on stream now. Some people have actually been asking me to do branded Memento. I'm like, maybe, but I'll try out Memento. But yeah, sounds good, and I really do appreciate you guys coming on and spending the last hour with us talking about branded. I'm sure people are going to really appreciate this as kind of a little guide and then also discussion piece for people looking to play branded in the TCG right now. So once again, thank you, Darwin, and thank you, Khalid. Everyone, please check out their channels down below. And with that being said, leave a comment down below if you guys have any more questions and what you guys thought about the podcast. And with that being said, we will be seeing you guys later. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for having us.
yeah, you too. Thank you very much.